Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to tell you about two new rad enduro/super enduro mountain bikes from a brand you probably aren't expecting and a brand we've never had on this channel before. Tiffany, I've had enough of you. So the brand is Salsa Cycles, and we have not featured them on this channel before, and we've never historically been a dealer for Salsa Cycles, but we are now, and that's basically because back in January we saw these two bikes at an event put on by these guys and their parent company, QBP. Salsa Cycles was originally founded in 1981 by a guy named Ross Schaefer. They've been making mountain bikes since then, but they're not super popular in the mountain bike world, because at least for us, right? We kind of live in that long travel for full suspension world for the most part. Salsa historically has been really well known for adventure bikes, gravel bikes, bike packing, touring, fat bikes, full suspension fat bikes, and kind of shorter travel mountain bikes, hardtails, 120 mil travel bikes and under. They've not made a foray yet into the long travel world until now. And when we saw these bikes in January, we were kind of jaw dropped and like, holy we're really interested in Salsa now. The suspension platform is by DW. That's a Dave Weagle design. He is like a suspension guru in the mountain bike world. A ton of brands use his design, including Pivot, Ibis, and Da Vinci. So he comes with a huge amount of weight when he helps brands design, proprietary suspension designs for their brand. Good. So anyways, these things are amazing. The Cassidy is what I'm calling a super enduro bike, so it's 165 millimeters of rear travel, 180 in the front, and the Blackthorn is 140 millimeters in the back, 160 millimeters in the front. So we're very pumped to bring on this brand for a number of reasons. These two bikes, yes, absolutely, but another reason is for us, as we sit right now, we don't really carry any bike brands that offer sort of a breadth of bikes. Most of what we carry are like really high-end boutique brands, and kind of our entry-level price point's about $4,500 or even $5,000.
Oh, you think you fancy?
Salsa to us now is a brand we can carry in all three of our stores, the one here in Newbury Park, California, Sparks, Nevada, and Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So we can now get access to bikes that we can sell on our website and in our stores that start anywhere from actually even like $1,200 in terms of hardtails, and then full suspension bikes in that $2,000 and $3,000 range. So a lot more approachable price point and really well-spec'd bikes. So that's why we were so excited to bring on Salsa as a brand, and especially, again, these bikes are epic, so let's talk about them. Both of these bikes have very, very progressive numbers. So when we first saw these things, we were sort of instantly shocked by just the design language, the look of them, and also some pretty impressive, cool little features. Like basically everyone these days is doing a little frame strap pack where you're putting your tubes, CO2, multi-tool and stuff on your frame strapped on there. Salsa engineered this whole thing to be built in. So the bikes actually come with this little Velcro strap, a little rubber pad here to protect the frame, and this area for that whole little frame kit. I've currently got an IPA placed there, for example. There's still room for a full-size water bottle and split pivot rear suspension. So that's kind of what I want to talk about the most when it comes to both these bikes. So Salsa's been using split pivot for a long time. Again, that is a DW, Dave Weagle sort of patented design, and a couple other brands use it. Da Vinci's the other main one. And then you probably also know that it's on Trex as well, but that's not Dave Weagle's, and there's some weird patent shenanigans on the whole backstory of that, but I'm not really familiar with it. Either way, it's a really good design. What matters about it the most? Why it's so important? So The idea is to completely isolate suspension and braking forces. So what that means is that traditionally on a full suspension bike, when you're on rough terrain and you're braking, the suspension tends to sort of freeze up, either entirely or a lot, and that causes the bike to kind of just lose its stability and lose all of that plushness and suspension movement while you're on the brakes in that rough terrain. The tires tend to skid or lift off the ground a little bit. The idea behind split pivot is to isolate that, because you have two entirely separate pieces, seat stay and chain stay, are not connected, and there's actually a pivot that surrounds the axle. The brake is on top of the seat stay. And what that does in real life is basically exactly what it's designed to do. It's very impressive how that works. So here's some footage of me on a local trail where there's a couple sections on this trail. It's really steep. This section in particular, you have to bunny hop over a rain rut, and then you basically have to get on the brakes really hard in a rough, bumpy section, which you're looking at right now. That section, hard to tell from the video, but it's super fast, it's bumpy, and you really need your bike to be stable and in control there, because you have a fence coming up on your right, you have a really steep rock garden chute that's right after it. That's the kind of section where you ride a bike like this and you rail those brakes and the thing just slows down and it doesn't skid, it doesn't accidentally skid, it just stays totally stable and moves you forward and feels so good. So it's an incredibly good design, and I've always ridden Da Vinci's with this design in the past and really enjoyed that particular feature, especially when you're trying to push yourself, push the bike, and when you're in scenarios where you're riding steep terrain or just rough terrain that you have to be on the brakes simultaneously, which is all the time. It makes for a very capable, stable, sort of composed bike and composed suspension platform. So something really important to highlight there, because yes, Salsa has not been in the long travel suspension world, but when you slap DW's name on it, it's good. Basically, if you look at the numbers, you see how modern they are, you slap DW's name on it. When we saw all of that, we're like, we don't even need to ride these things and we know they're good. Of course, we rode them extensively, and yes, we assured ourselves that they are as good as we thought.
It doesn't matter what you think!
What? To tell you a little bit about how progressive they went with this thing. So the Cassidy, again, 165 millimeters of rear travel, 180 in the front, either comes with a Zeb or a 38. Very progressive in terms of how long, low, and slack it is. So the Cassidy in particular, 63.8 degree head tube angle, 75.7 degree seat tube angle, 460 millimeters on the reach in a medium, and 481 in a large, 432 millimeter chainstay. So it's also got a 157 Super Boost rear end. Very long, low, and slack, and super modern in that sense. So when you see new bikes come out, this is kind of what you want to see. You know, if you look at the historical trends over the last 5 years, bikes continue to get longer reaches, more slack, more capable in terms of suspension platform, and that's the direction they're going. So when you buy a brand new bike this day and age, you definitely want to see numbers like that. So now let's talk about the numbers on the Blackthorn. The Blackthorn, 140 millimeters in the back, 160 in the front. This to me is a little bit more practical of a bike. The Cassidy being 165, 180 is very super enduro bike parky. I think this is more practical in terms of like overall trail / enduro riding, at least that I do and enjoy to do. What's interesting about both these bikes is they actually use the same front and rear triangles, and with a different link and rear shock, you can change the travel on them. So they're kind of both the same bike if you swap out a shock and a link, which is a pretty interesting feature that not too many bikes have. Geo, 64.6 degree head tube angle, 76.5 degree seat tube angle, 432 chainstays, 469 reach in the medium, and 490 in the large. Extremely long, low, and slack in that sense, and especially long. For some reason, and this is probably one of the only cons I have with these bikes, is they did spec them with a 50 millimeter long stem, which is kind of way too long for how long this is. I typically like riding a size large bike. My height would dictate a medium, but I like a longer wheelbase and more roomy reach. This thing with a 50 mil stem feels too long. I would put a 32 mil stem on it and ride a large, or probably be totally comfortable with a 40 mil stem on a medium. So sizing is kind of a crapshoot these days. Every brand is different. Like one person's medium could be 30 millimeters different than another person's. So I don't know, that's a whole nother video, but pay attention to sort of what you feel comfortable on, what reach numbers you like, and try to just understand the reach number in particular, reach number and stem length, and go from one bike to the next if you're considering buying a new bike. So something important to think about there. Blackthorn to me, I love this thing. We are doing a Moab trip with Chasing Epic, which is a mountain bike tour company, this October, and I'm going to be taking this bike because I've kind of fallen in love with it. Very similar to the Cassidy in the sense that you have full room for water bottle. You actually have top tube mounts up here if you wanted to put a top tube bag or something like that, or a small little bag there. You have that whole little cool feature, that little rubber pad. You can slide in your little frame kit right there. Yeah, super impressive stuff. Price points on these things are awesome. They make them in aluminum and carbon frames. Do note one kind of downside, and actually a lot of split pivot bikes are like this. The chainstay is aluminum, all the rest of the stuff is carbon. So when they say carbon, everything's carbon but that chainstay, which is this piece of the triangle right here. So let's talk about the price points. As I mentioned earlier, one of the key reasons for us in taking on the Salsa brand is that they offer a breadth of bikes, from amazing sort of world-class gravel and adventure bikes, but they also have really cool hardtails, and then their full suspension mountain bikes, including these two guys, are offered at price points that all of our other brands that we currently carry don't hit. So we're super excited to just offer more of a price range to our customers, especially just good build spec, and that's something that Salsa has done really well with these bikes and their other bikes. So as with all of our videos, in the video description below will be a link to an article that'll break both of these bikes down if you want to look at the actual geo charts, see all the particular build specs and the price points and all of that. But to give you a gist, like I mentioned earlier, these things are both offered in aluminum frames or carbon frames, and the price points start at $31.99. So the Blackthorn in an aluminum frame with a Shimano Dior kit on it, $3,199. The SLX, still aluminum frame, $3,899, and that's the same with the Cassidy. The carbon frame SLX, $4,899 for both bikes. The carbon GX, $5,999. The Cassidy's $1,000 more. And the carbon X01 build, which is only available on the Blackthorn, which has carbon wheels coming in at $74.99. So very impressive price points there. And again, that's another reason why we were kind of drawn to these bikes, because they spec'd good stuff on them. Other than the stems that are a little bit too long, the cranks are the right length, the build kits are really well done on these things, and they definitely just put good suspension on them and really important stuff. Like, they hit all the nails on the head that you'd want to in terms of like drivetrain, suspension, price points, carbon wheels on the X01 kit, which is really good to see, and just all around like good build specs and good sort of value for your money there. And that's something that not all brands have. Some brands kind of carry a little bit too much brand equity and brand weight, and you pay a little bit for the name, but I think Salsa's coming in with a much more humbled take on how much they're offering you in terms of how much bike you get for your money. Well, if you have watched this far, you're probably pretty interested in either of these bikes, and you definitely should be. They're coming to the market with just really good suspension platforms, really good build kits, really good price points. And like I said earlier, Salsa has not historically been known for long travel mountain bikes by any means, but Dave Weagle sure as hell has been known for long travel everything. He was the one who designed, I think he kind of got his claim to fame, at least in my eyes as a mountain biker, as a young kid, the Iron Horse Sunday, which was a World Cup winning downhill bike that Sam Hill piloted to several World Championships and World Cup wins. So anyways, DW is behind these things. The geo numbers are incredibly progressive, and the suspension platform works amazingly well. The build kits come in at really good price points, and overall, that's kind of what we were looking for, right? Whenever we bring on a new brand, we have a lot of thought process that goes into that, and especially when we saw these bikes and looked at the rest of Salsa's lineup, we were really impressed with sort of everything we saw, and this really fits the bill for sort of our customer base. We do plan on having these things as demos in hopefully all 3 of our stores, coming sort of late this summer/fall and then into next spring. Bike availability is a bit of a crapshoot right now across the board because of the pandemic, but that's a whole other story. Definitely worth riding one of these things so you can see how it feels, how good that thing actually works under braking, and how stable and controlled and composed this bike feels when the going gets steep and when it gets rough. They are both very slack bikes and very long. So the faster you push these things, the harder you ride them, the more you're gonna be impressed with how controlled it is and how good it feels. Yeah, they're not climbers. That's not really the point. They do have great suspension platforms in terms of there's no bob, there's definitely good efficiency there. I mean, they climb as good as any other bike sort of in its class with that amount of travel. But being this slack and this long, where you really see a bike like this shine is once you point the thing downhill, and the steeper it gets and the rougher it gets, that's really where a bike like this is gonna shine and be just incredibly impressive and just a good overall mountain bike. So final thoughts, go ride one of these, test it out. Obviously, like I said, Salsa is more known for shorter travel mountain bikes and adventure bikes, but these things are coming with really good platforms and everything else about them. So for sure, if you get an opportunity to ride one of these, whether it's in our stores or any local Salsa dealers, there is a ton of local Salsa dealers all across the US and I think across the world. Hopefully they fire up their demo tour next season. Obviously it's on hold for 2020, but hopefully next season they do and you can get a chance to ride one of these things. Hit that article below in the video description for more information and that subscribe button. Hit that. See you in the next one.